Welcome back to A Bit of Curiosity. I'm your host, Jeremy Howlett. Today I've got Daryl Klingaman on, and I love this. I had him write a little bio, and he threw it into ChatGPT, so I'm actually going to read the ChatGPT bio for him because that kind of tells you a little bit more about who Daryl is. But Daryl is a dedicated husband, father of four, and an endurance athlete who pushes the limits with marathons, ultra marathons, and his own concoction of outdoor endurance adventures, which we're going to get into. Professionally, Daryl's journey has been nothing short of exhilarating. As a driving force behind one of the top Google Premier partner agencies, he helped scale it to an impressive team of over 150 employees and nearly $30 million in annual revenue. Today, Daryl's passion for growth is being channeled into Hire Day, the #1 global staffing agency for marketing roles. From scaling businesses to conquering finish lines, Daryl brings a relentless drive to every pursuit. Welcome to a conversation where success, stamina, and strategy collide. End quote. Talk to us a little bit about that, right? Like success, stamina, and strategy colliding. Like give us your philosophy on that. Like where does that come in play in your life? Like go over that for us.
Man, that sounds way more exciting than how it probably actually looks in real life. But yeah, I think high level, I got infatuated with business while I was still wrapping up my undergraduate degree and joined a small startup company where we had a ton of professional success. I became a partner in that company, and we achieved growth levels that most companies don't. And along the way, I realized that I was on the path to probably an early death in the most extreme of scenarios, and maybe less extreme, some serious health complications as I aged. Decided to make some changes. As I made those changes, I got really infatuated with exercise, outdoor exercise specifically, and still needed to fit that into a very rigorous work schedule, a growing family, and so forth. And so I've become really interested in and maybe a little bit obsessed with what we're capable of as human beings. And a lot of times that takes the form of physical endurance type activities and challenging myself and getting excited watching other people push the limits there. But also fitting that into a normal lifestyle with family, with work, and the other responsibilities and obligations that we might have. And so I can remember what is said, the collision of stamina and strategy and whatever. That's how it looks on a daily basis to me, is how do I fit in a good workout, some work to provide for my family, and good quality time with my family as I'm raising 4 young children and figuring that out day by day.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming out of college, was that the agency that you joined up with, or was that prior to the agency?
That was, yep. So that was a marketing agency that I joined. The agency was about a year old when I had joined up and was doing a phenomenal job already. I was employee number 10 when I joined this agency. So to be at that point a year in was pretty remarkable already. And yeah, I was getting a business degree at the time and had a friend that was at this agency that kind of lured me over there. And I ended up spending a decade of my professional career there, and it was an awesome ride.
So you kind of get into it there, and the long days, the long hours, the agency work where you're always on call. Black Friday is not a holiday. Like Thanksgiving is not a holiday. It's one of your busiest times of the year to work, and all of that kind of combines, and you realize that, oh, this is a bit too much. I'm a little in over my head, physically, health wise, mentally, right? So were there individuals, books, people that you look to that kind of inspired your athletic pursuits? Like you played football in high school and stuff, but like coming out of college,
Yeah.
coming out of kind of team sports, you've transitioned to more, for lack of a better, like individual activities, right? But are there individuals that have inspired that for you?
Yeah, there absolutely were. And there continue to be. The biggest example was when I was working at this agency. At the time I was the chief revenue officer leading our internal sales and marketing efforts. And I had an individual on my sales team that I was talking to in the office. I had just stumbled into Cam Hanes on Instagram. I didn't follow him, but he was doing some live streaming while he was running a 100-mile backyard ultra. And that was actually my first realization that people ran further than a marathon distance. Up until that point, a marathon was the pinnacle in my mind. I learned in high school that the first person that ran that distance died. And in Greece, running to the city of Marathon. And so in my mind, that was the absolute pinnacle of athletic pursuits. And then I stumbled into Cam Hanes on Instagram, and he looks cool as a cucumber 80 miles in on a 100-mile backyard ultra. There was a pretty immediate paradigm shift in my mind that if 100 miles is possible, I can do 26.2. And so I think the same day that I'd seen this on Instagram, I was having this conversation with one of my sales team members, and we were talking about it, and we both, in that moment, decided we were going to run a marathon. Neither of us were runners. Neither of us enjoyed running. Again, I was a football player in high school. I was also a baseball player. Running was not my idea of a good time. And after high school, I'd spent time in the gym lifting weights, very little time running. And so running a marathon was more about challenging ourselves than it was something that actually sounded enjoyable or fun. And we were just going to grit our teeth and get through it. And to make a long story short, midway through training for my first marathon, I went out for a long run. And upon finishing, realized I actually enjoyed that. I just ran for like 2-3 hours, and that was actually an enjoyable experience. What just happened? And it's kind of been off to the races since then. So Cam Hanes is the big one that flipped a switch in my mind that if the human body is capable of 100, and I later found out that Cam had run the Moab 240, a 240-mile ultra marathon, and dozens of people run that every year, then 26 miles is actually no big deal. We're talking about a tenth of what I'm seeing others push their bodies to do. I can get out and do that.
Awesome. So you've run a marathon now. So talk to it like, let's see, a couple of weeks ago, you did what you call the Everest challenge. So kind of highlight, like, you didn't climb Everest, but you climbed the equivalent in elevation. So talk to us about that event, kind of how that transpired, and what kind of mindset went into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've run a number of marathons now, a couple of distances longer than a marathon at this point.
So what distances longer than a marathon?
I've done a 50K and I have done a 50-miler as well. I enjoy those races, but after a few marathons, I actually didn't really enjoy all the rigmarole around a marathon. I've run some of the larger ones, like the St. George Marathon, for example. I've run some really small ones. I don't like the forced start time, get on the buses 3 hours before the race starts, be huddling around a campfire with hundreds of other people, waiting in line for the porta-john, etc. And started to kind of lose interest in marathons. Ran a couple of ultras, trail races, and I liked those quite a bit more. I liked getting to aid stations, and they're serving up Coca-Cola and peanut M's and
absolutely. Give me some potato chips and M's in the middle of a race. I'm in heaven,
exactly.
Right? Like, for sure.
Yep. So I realized, okay, this is a little bit more in my style. And but still, I had an experience where I woke up one morning for a race and actually felt terrible. Decided not to do it that day. It was a marathon, and woke up the next day and just ran a marathon on my own, and it went phenomenally. And I realized that sometimes the body's ready, sometimes it's not. Sometimes we have good days, sometimes we don't. I started to get really interested in doing these things on my own. So I've done a few like 30-mile runs just on my own, and arguably enjoy those more than the organized races. And so at this point, I'm having a lot of fun with just my own challenges. And so I love the idea of climbing Everest. I don't know if the risk is worth the reward for me at this point with 4 young children. My mindset on some of those things has changed. My mission in life is not to summit the highest peaks, although I do love the idea of that. My mission is a little more oriented around family. And so I probably won't climb Everest at this point. And this was a good challenge that tickled a little bit of that itch. Pretty different than climbing Everest itself, but what we did is me and a buddy, we went up to the ski resort, Snowbird in Utah here for the weekend, and we climbed bottom to top of the resort and rode the tram down over and over and over again until we had climbed the equivalent height of Mount Everest. So we ended up climbing 30,000 feet. Everest is just over 29,000 feet. It grows every year, for those that don't know that. So I'd say just over 29,000 feet. So we climbed 30,000 feet. It was about 33 miles of hiking in that challenge. And it was a blast, man. It was hard. It was mentally challenging to start up the exact same trail that we had just started an hour and a half, 2 hours previously for our fourth or fifth time that day. But it was fun. It was fun to be in good company. It was fun to eat good food, snack on junk food, not necessarily have a certain time in our minds that we needed to hit, but rather we're going to climb 30,000 feet. Neither of us had ever done anything like that previously. So it was an awesome, awesome challenge.
Yeah, I think for those listening that have never done even a marathon or anything, especially longer than a marathon, one of the things that is probably most discouraging to people is the physical toll that it looks like it takes, right? Which it is, right? Like it's definitely a feat of physicality. But the hardest thing about going especially further than a marathon, is the mental toll. I recently had James Lawrence, aka the Iron Cowboy, on the podcast. He did 100 consecutive iron distance events, right? And he actually pushed it to one more, and he did 101. And what's fascinating about that is kind of how he got to the 101. And we kind of go over it a lot, right? But to briefly just highlight it here is it was like day 6 or something. I think it was Casey, it was either Aaron or Casey, but one of his wingmen was like, hey, wouldn't it be so cool if we did 101? Like we just do an extra one. And James's immediate response was, no way. Like, I'm struggling right now. Like, there's no way we're going to do 101. Like, we set out to do 100, we're going to do it. But then by the time he got to like day 90-ish, he was like, yeah, you know what? Let's do 101. Like, let's go show people that we can go above and beyond what we set forth to do, right? But it takes a lot of mental fortitude to get to that point. And so, like you talk about, right? Like, okay, we come down the tram or down, and we get back to the trailhead. And now I've got to go back up the same trail that I've done 5, 6, 7 times already for my next pursuit. How do you push through that?
At this point, I think I'm expecting that mental challenge, and I'm very welcoming of it. I knew that going into it. That was actually something that I had thought about, is how much I'm going to hate this trail by the end of it. And that's part of the challenge itself, right? Is to choose to keep going back up it. Especially we picked a weekend where Oktoberfest was going on up there. We come down and we just smell brats and everybody's partying. And we're the weirdos that don't go party. We head right back to the trailhead and go right back up, right? So at this point, I knew it was coming. I knew that would be a challenge, and I was very interested just to feel that and just to go through that. So it ended up being kind of cool, though, because what definitely felt like dread when we got off the tram at the bottom and started right back up that very familiar trail that we had just started, that all in all, we were going to have to do 11 times in a row. What started as dread, I think most of the laps, that dread subsided really quickly. And I did my best to just live in the present moment and enjoy what we have. And it was fall up at Snowbird, and the leaves were turning colors, and the weather for the most part was a very cool and comfortable temperature. And the weather was great. And so most of the time, that dread turned to appreciation, that I even just had the ability to be out there and do that. I mentioned my kids. I have 4 kids, so the fact that my wife's willing to take care of them and let me go do this for a weekend, I often feel appreciation for that. And so I absolutely felt dread getting off the tram and starting back up the trail. But most of the laps that weekend, that dread would turn to gratitude pretty quickly. But there's absolutely sections of that trail that are more difficult than others. And when we hit those, and I knew they were coming, that dread would kind of wash over me again. We'd power through those steeper climbs, and I'd get back to being grateful to be out there in nature.
Oh, that's great. I love the mindset there of gratitude, right? Like quickly turning that dread into gratitude. Like, I'm grateful that my body can do this. I'm grateful that I have the time to do this. I'm grateful that I've trained. I'm grateful for the beauty around me, right? Like just recognizing that abundance and that mindset of gratitude. And I also love how you point out like how grateful you are for your wife. I've been on the other side of it a lot. So I know the toll that takes to like, okay, my spouse is going to go out and do this crazy adventure while I take care of the kids, or I'm supporting them or whatever, right? Like I've been there. I've been there through several 100-mile races, adventure races, all kinds of stuff. So she deserves a lot of praise and gratitude for letting you go do crazy things like that. So, because that weekend sometimes is her time as well, because you're working all week and now she finally gets a break, but then she doesn't because you decided to go out and do an adventure.
That's exactly right.
So hopefully she feels that gratitude and that appreciation because she deserves it. So I find it fascinating to like, I'm always curious how people get into ultra running or ultra type events, right? Like this isn't an ultra race by any means, but it's definitely like classed as an adventure race, right? Like, and sometime we can sit down and talk more about adventure racing, like not adventure racing, but like self-supported or like that type of stuff, right? Like White Rim Trail is a really popular one down in gosh,
is that Moab?
Canyonlands. Yeah, down in Canyonlands National Park. So if you ever want to do 100 that's not a race, that's a great 100-mile course through Canyonlands that you can go do in March-ish time frame. Don't wait too much after that. Zion Traverse is a fantastic one. And these are all through national parks, so you can't do them as races, but they're beautiful, like epic locations. I've done the Zion Traverse. It's 50 miles from and now I don't know how you can do it now. I'd have to go look at the maps, but they've closed off the trail to the East Rim from Zion Canyon because of rock falls and some of that stuff. So I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can comment on how they still do it, but I'm not sure how it's done. I did it years ago, but
let us know. I want to add it to the list.
Yeah, and that one's a great one, right? Like Rim to Rim to Rim is another popular one. I think that's what 35-ish.
So
that's more than that.
That's my next big one. Depending on the trail, it's 43 to 48 miles.
43, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. And that's my next big one. I'm doing that in the spring, so that's what's going to keep me motivated and pushing it through the winter here.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff like that you can certainly go do where you don't have to get up at 4 a.m. and hang out around a fireplace and whatever. But there are some pretty epic ultras that you could go do and look up, right? Like everybody here along the Wasatch Front kind of wants to put the pin of Wasatch 100 in their cap, and that one is I think it's 27,000 feet of climbing over the course of 100 miles from Farmington down to Midway. So, but yeah, there's a lot, right? Like there are so many places that we can go and see and do. And I'm with you. I love the individual stuff. However, I love the aid stations. I love being able to stop and get potato chips and peanut M&Ms and Dr. Pepper along my race course, right? Like
that's right.
I'll tell you, like, and you could probably, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but my VKs were all easier than my marathon ever was. And it was a lot more fun too.
Yeah, I think there's something there. For me, what I've experienced is up to the marathon distance, it's pretty easy, especially a road marathon, pretty easy to have a pace in mind that you have to hit. And that pace guides the entire day. And it's the marathon, unless you're elite and unless you know the course, it's kind of hard to have a super specific pace in mind. We'll set things like I'd love to break 12 hours or I'd love to break 24 hours or whatever. But I agree with the 50K. I deal with a lot of gastrointestinal issues when I run. That's kind of the big thing that holds me back with running. And I get so sick during marathons, and when I hit that point on my 50K, I just ate a bunch and I just walked for, 40 minutes, and stomach issues went away. I had phenomenal energy after that. And so I finished the race great. And it was a more enjoyable experience than most of my marathon experiences.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is, unless you're elite, right? But like in a marathon, you still feel like you have to run the whole 26.2, right? Like it's like, I don't want to walk, I want to run the whole thing. I want to do it in under 4 hours, whatever, right? Like whatever arbitrary goal we're pulling out of the air, right? Like I want to do it in 3:30 or whatever that looks like, right? Like, and if you're elite, I get it, right? Like it's like, okay, I gotta, as a female, right? Like I want to go be better than 240, or as a male, like I want to be 235, 230, right? Like, I get it, but like for us, average back of the pack, if I have to power hike this section for the next 3 miles, so be it. Like I'm just out here to enjoy the day. Like let's go. I want to get to that finish line, absolutely, but I don't have any. There's no number that I'm pulling out and saying okay. So no, that's awesome. So what do endurance events teach you, and kind of how do they transition into the rest of your life?
Yeah, I think endurance events are cool because you tend to spend so much time putting your body through so much that you ride kind of an emotional roller coaster throughout it. And a lot of times it feels like life compressed into a day with the amount of time that you have. When I did the backyard Everest challenge, no earbuds in the whole time, just me and my mind the entire time. There were some laps when we talked a lot. I had one buddy with me. We spent 5 laps where we didn't say a word. We were both just in our own worlds, having our own experiences. And so your mind is able to process a lot. Fatiguing your body like that does throw the body through different emotions than your average comfortable day inside of an air-conditioned home with food and water aplenty and so forth. So you go through so many emotions. You have time to go through so many thoughts that a lot of times I say it's life compressed in a day. So I actually feel like it is a very healthy thing to go out and just process so much, allow the body to experience all of that, feel emotional highs, feel emotional lows. I also think it's a good reminder to appreciate how easy and comfortable our everyday lives are. I often remind people of that, and I often challenge people to get out and do something hard, whether that's cold water or that is a hike up a mountain, but do something hard. Start your day with something hard too. And then you get back to, again, climate controlled buildings, comfortable office chair, food and beverage within arm's reach, etc. And our lives are actually pretty dang easy. Even raising four young kids, we have so many comforts, and it's so easy. So I think getting out and doing these endurance types events gives you an appreciation for that. I also think those with the mental fortitude to push through it are able to accomplish really remarkable things. I have this crazy idea, Jeremy. No time to execute on this right now, but if anyone out there wants to link up on this, hit me up. Venture capital firm where we allow founders to pitch us on their businesses at the top of a mountain if they can make it to the top of that mountain. And here's the big twist. We tell them that's the only place we take pitches is at the top of a mountain. We tell founders who want to pitch their business and receive funding, meet us at this trailhead, and you'll be able to pitch us at the top of the mountain. Bring whatever you need to make an effective pitch. What we don't tell them is, because it's so windy and the elements can be a little rough at the top of the mountain, we definitely need a little bit of shelter up there. We need a big canvas tent or something that probably requires some steel poles, and that has to get to the top of the mountain somehow. So they show up, and we let them know you will also need to get this tent to the top of the mountain. And we see which founders have the resilience and the grit to do so. And that doesn't guarantee funding, but that guarantees they have an opportunity to pitch us at the top of that mountain. So one of the reasons that the thesis behind this fund would be that founders with that level of resilience, not just to gear up to hike up to the top of a mountain, but then to get hit with new adversity at the trailhead, being told we have a 300-pound tent that needs to make it to the top as well. The ones that can deal with that just bump in the road, which is so common in business, are going to accomplish more than those that shy away from that type of challenge. So that's one of the things that I love about endurance challenges is I think I'm proving to myself the type of person that I am and the type of person that I want to be in those moments. And I think that is important to prove to ourselves that we are who we say we are who we think we are. And I'm someone that doesn't shy away from challenges, right? And so getting up early to train is a good example of that. You've been with me when we jump in a Rocky Mountain hot tub, which is actually a cold stream flowing through the Rocky Mountains here in Utah. I push myself to do those things because I'm proving to myself who I am and that I can do hard things. And at least for me, I find a lot of value in continuing to reiterate just to myself that I am who I think I am, because I think I am someone that can do hard things.
Yeah. There's power in doing hard things, right? Like teaching ourselves that, okay, I can accomplish this, right? Just this last week. So every Friday we go out with sometimes a group of others, and you're there every Friday. Some of us don't always make it. But this recent one, right? Like you're like, okay, we're gonna meet at the high school track, and I think we all know what that means when Daryl says we're meeting at the track and bring gloves. So I showed up. I didn't want to. I did not want to be there. I did not want to. Yeah, I knew what was ahead of me. I didn't want to show up. I was the first one there. I even beat you there. Jogged a lap before you got there. Wasn't sure if you were going to show up. I figured you would, but you did. And I think mostly I was hoping you wouldn't show up because I could go run. I could jog a few laps and I'd be fine. But your challenge for the day was to do the world's toughest mile or whatever it's called. And I will admit that I did not complete it. It's 400 meters of burpees, 400 meters of lunges, 400 meters of army crawl, right?
Bear crawl.
Bear crawl. And then 400 meters of sprinting to get that full mile. And I made it 100 meters of burpees, 200 meters of lunges. And I did not do the bear crawl because I had to go take my daughter her trumpet for the day. But I did jog in between some of those, so I got some distance. But you completed the whole thing. And I think that's super impressive, right? Because it's 400 meters of burpees is really, really, really hard.
It is.
That's a lot of burpees. And then to follow it up with lunges and then to all of right? That's a pretty powerful accomplishment, and that kind of attests to your fortitude, your mindset, what you can set forth and do. And I think to your point, right, like you're teaching yourself that you can do these things, and that translates to when we hit bumps in the road with our marriages, with raising our kids, with whatever challenges face us in business. I like the idea of a VC firm pitch meeting on the top of a mountain, right? Like, okay, we're going to take, whether it's a 7-mile hike in, or it's and it doesn't have to be death defying, right? Like it doesn't have to be at the top of Grand Teton, right? Like where you have to have ropes and climbing ability or whatever to get there. But I'm recently writing about comparing building and starting a business to running 50 miles, right? Like there's so many similarities in there, because especially if it's a new course, like any course, right? Like if you've never done it before, you need some type of guide. Most business owners can't go start a business by themselves, right? Like I need a mentor. I need somebody to help me through it, right? Like it takes some of that. I'm going to hit a lot of challenges along the way. There's going to be a lot of times I'm going to say, you know what? Here's a road. Why don't you guys just go get the car and come pick me up?
Yep.
Or I'm just going to walk out to civilization because I'm done.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of mental fortitude in pushing through and completing that, right? And so, no, I think there's some awesome lessons. There's some awesome things that we can liken to that. I'm super intrigued on this VC idea. That's really interesting.
It would be fun. I think that's a fun thesis to go and test as well. I think one of the things that, like I've said, and a lot of people don't like this, but is I think everyone is a runner. Everyone can be a runner. Everyone probably should be. And I see so many business owners that, one, neglect their personal health, right?
Yeah.
And that was me for quite a while. but two that just don't value it, don't think they're capable of it. I mean, we've all heard it. I'm too big. I have bad knees, whatever. I think the reality is like all of that was true for me. I was much larger when I started on this fitness journey of mine. My knees hurt all the time. But here's the thing. I think one, we've talked about pushing through and enduring and how that is very applicable to our everyday lives and to growing a business. I think two, we show up as better people in our daily lives when we get out and we do hard physical challenges. I think running is one of the best ways to do that, especially because when you're operating at an anaerobic threshold, meaning you're out of breath, you're panting, whether that's a HIIT type workout or sprinting or whatever, it's actually hard to process a lot of thought in those moments.
Yeah.
But jogging or running at more of an aerobic threshold gives you an opportunity to do a lot of mental processing as well. I have found tremendous benefit in being able to operate better on a day-to-day basis in a family setting, but also in a business setting. I truly believe, because I give myself that opportunity most mornings to operate at an aerobic threshold where my body can actually process a lot of different thought, a lot of different ideas. And so I think everyone should be a runner. Hot take, controversial thought in some circles, but I think everyone should be a runner to some extent, or a jogger. Let's say a jogger. Maybe that sounds less scary. Everyone should be a jogger.
And I'll say, like, if you don't feel like you can get out and run or jog, start going on brisk walks and brisk hikes, right? Like, start there. Rucking is kind of the 2%er, right? Like, term that's come out over the last year or two as the idea of hiking or walking with weight. It's been around, like people have been doing this for a long time, right? But it's only recently that I think the term rucking has been coined
and popularized.
That's another thing that you can go do, right? But I think even if you could just get outside and go for a walk, because you're absolutely right when it comes to thought, right? Like and I find this a lot of times if I'm stuck on something or I'm not feeling creative or I'm just kind of in a funk, the best thing for me to do is go on a long walk. Mile plus, right? Like preferably 2 to 3 to 5 miles, and really just let the ideas flow. And if I don't run, it's not like whatever. Running, I think, has some other added benefits for sure, right? Like, but even just a walk or a hike can be powerful. But if you go to the gym and you're trying to throw down a HIIT workout, or you're going to CrossFit, or you're like, okay, great, those are good physically. It's good kind of pushing through, but you're right. Like the ideas don't flow when you're in that state versus when you're out running, biking, walking, that type of stuff. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
doing burpees around that track, I wasn't having a ton of helpful business ideas in that moment.
No,
for sure.
So as a father, how do you transition these ideas to your children?
I hadn't connected any dots on that until recently. I had an experience just a few months ago. I went and spent a weekend out with Joe DeSena, who is the CEO of Spartan Races. He has an incredible farm out in Vermont. And went and spent a weekend with him out there and heard from him, and even saw his family was out there that weekend as well. Saw some of how he interacts with his kids and the challenges that they do. And his kids do 2-a-day workouts, by the way. We're talking like 6 to 12-year-olds, exercising in the morning, exercising in the evening. And from my brief interaction, seemed like very remarkable kids. He had his young daughter teaching us the Teddy Roosevelt speech, The Man in the Arena. There is a section of that speech that's been very popularized. I love it. I have a poster of it hanging in my office. I've never memorized it. I mean, it's like 4 paragraphs long. I generally don't memorize things that long. But his whole family has it memorized, and he has his like 8 or 9-year-old daughter teaching us this. And not only is she teaching us this,
this is the Daring Greatly speech, right? So
it's exactly right. Yep. And not only is she teaching us this, she's coaching us on how to get better at memorizing things, and is very confident in telling grown men, no, you can't do it that way. You'll never memorize this long of a thing if you do it that way. And I thought it was remarkable. And long story short, that changed kind of my paradigm on what I expect of my kids. I think I've just expected far too little out of them, and they're far more capable than I was giving them credit for previously. One of the easiest ways that I've come home and implemented some of this is my kids love hot chocolate in the morning. They love to have dessert every night. And those kind of just started to become regulars in our house. Cool, they can wake up and like make themselves hot chocolate and they can have dessert every night. Now they earn it. And so my 9-year-old comes to me every night and says, "Dad, what's my workout in the morning to earn hot chocolate?" And we start out with burpees in the living room, and we have a camera. And so I have video after video after video of it being completely pitch black. My daughter in her hooded Snuggie stumble downstairs all tired and start doing burpees in her Snuggie in the living room. She's doing pull-ups now. She has like a hanging loft bed in her room, and she does pull-ups on the side of her loft bed. And truthfully, I was kind of just tired of coming up with new workouts every night. And so I said, "Hey, every day just do 10 pull-ups." Somehow she heard that as every day do 10 more pull-ups. And I haven't changed that. That's not what I said. This morning was 40 pull-ups.
Wow.
So
Impressive.
She's doing 10 more pull-ups every day. She did come to me and she said, "Dad, this is getting really hard. Is it okay if I break it up? And I do some the night before or some the morning of?" And I said, "That sounds great. Let's do it," right? Because she's at 50 tomorrow. So she'll need to do 25 tonight and 25 in the morning. So it's awesome. My kids have really latched onto it. And I think that's it was an eye-opener for me that I just expect far too little of them. They're remarkable. They're capable. They want to do great things. And I just wasn't asking them to. I was just giving them, coddling them, making sure that their lives were comfortable and so forth. And they're so capable and they want to do great things. And no, they haven't begged to do burpees every single day. They've complained plenty of days, but by far and large, they've been very accepting of this challenge. And now, before dessert at night, they're doing some physical activity, 30 push-ups or 30 burpees or something. And before they can have hot chocolate in the morning, they're doing something.
So they haven't just given up asking for hot chocolate or dessert. They're actually putting in the work.
Yep. No, they still want those things. Those things still exist in our house. But yeah, they're putting in the work. This last weekend, this was cool. This last weekend, I told my kids if they could come out and run a mile with me, get them a treat at the gas station. And they had a friend over. And my younger daughter, just so naive, said, "Well, can we do a mile and a half?" Sure. Yep, it's a mile and a half now, you guys. Why not? Yep, it's a mile and a half. And so my kid's friend who was over said, "If I do it, can I get something too?" And I said, "Sure, let's do it." So took the whole family out. My 3-year-old son begged to come as well. I made sure I brought the stroller because I knew he would not last long.
Yeah.
But took my 2 daughters, a girl from the neighborhood, my 3-year-old son out, and we ran a mile and a half. And we went to 7-Eleven, and they picked out a little treat. And it was super cool. Cool for me to get to go on a run with my kids. I hope that that's something that there's a lot more of in our future.
Yeah.
My kids are planning on doing track in the spring. And so I've been telling them, we got to get ready. And so this is the start of getting ready for that. And the neighborhood's involved now.
Well, that's great. That's awesome. So you and your family like to travel a lot. Tell us about some of your travel experiences. Where have you been? Like, what do they look like? I know they're going to evolve here shortly thanks to other activities, but talk to us about how they've been.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do like to travel, and we've done a little bit of international travel, and I think it's great. My wife and I have been to China. We've taken the whole family to Mexico a couple of times. My wife and I have traveled some other places in Central America as well. But here's another one of my hot takes is you don't need to travel internationally to have crazy cultural experiences and to experience really, really cool things.
Yeah.
And so one of the coolest things that we've done as a family is during COVID, we bought an RV and we've traveled around the country. So the first year that we had the RV, we spent 3 months in the RV. We visited 18 states. And I came back from that and I told people, you don't need to go on a lavish international vacation to have a wild experience in what feels like a different country. Just go to Louisiana.
I love Louisiana. Yeah.
Just go to Eastern Tennessee, man, and the Smoky Mountains and the Appalachians there. Like, you're going to feel like you transported to maybe a little bit of a different country. The Outer Banks of North Carolina.
Go take the side roads and stop at the farm stands in Tennessee and North Carolina, South Carolina, and you'll start to wonder where you are.
Exactly. So I love traveling within the U.S. We've been to, I'll have to check how many states it is, but my young kids have been to more states than I had been to by the time I was like 25 years old. And I think that's so fun. So yeah, we travel around with the RV. I think we've been to 30 plus states at this point, and we love it. And there's so many cool places here in the U.S. It's such a large country in comparison to most of the countries of the world that crossing state borders within the United States is akin to crossing country borders in Europe, for example. So get out and travel within the U.S. Don't feel like it needs to be an expensive, lavish international trip for you to have a phenomenal experience. The other plug I'll put in, man, is cram your family into a small RV and go spend a few months on the road. That is something else. It's challenging, but I love it, and you will grow closer as a family.
Were you able to work while you did that?
Yeah, the first year when we hit the road for 3 months, I was chief revenue officer of a 100-plus employee agency. We were hiring sales reps. I hired and onboarded multiple people while I was on the road. It was helpful that we were a fully remote company at the time. This was 2021, and we'd been a fully remote company for about 9 months at that point. But yes, I worked hard. I worked long hours that entire trip. It wasn't the most cush setup, but I had a little mini desk. I had my laptop. I even had a spare monitor and a ring light and so forth in our bedroom there in the RV. And honestly, it worked out great. I encourage everyone who can get out and do that to do that at some point. It's so cool. And we've gone back out summer after summer after summer at this point. And yep, I do try to reduce my work schedule a little bit, take Fridays off, things like that. So I have a little bit of sightseeing time with the family, but it's fun, man.
So is there a goal associated with it, or is it just a matter of like, okay, let's explore, let's adventure, and let's have family time?
Yeah, really, let's explore, let's adventure. My kids have really started to latch onto the junior ranger badges that you get at national parks. So we're starting to be a national park family, which I don't hate. I don't love, I don't hate, but we're starting to check off national parks, and that's what my kids are getting really into. So I don't know that we'll ever check off all the national parks, but at this point, we're excited about collecting junior ranger badges.
No, that's fun. My kids have gotten into that a little bit, right? Like my youngest is still she's 12 and she's still really into that. And so she really likes to go see national parks. And it's been a lot of fun. I think I was doing some quick head math when we were talking here. And I think before I was 30, I'd only been to maybe 10 states or less. And not counting maybe a couple of layover airports or whatever, but I think that's basically what it had been. In the last 14 years, since then, I've been to all 50 states in the last 14 years. And with my entire family, right? And that became a goal for us, right? Like we kind of did, it wasn't COVID, it was years before COVID, but we took a family trip and did that whole expedition and finally decided, we're going to end up hitting 20 states on this trip, right? Like you guys hit 18 on that 3 months, right? Like we were out for almost a month and we knew we were going to hit 20, but we were done.
Crazy.
And so it was kind of easy to say, you know what, like let's get all of our kids to all 50 states before our oldest graduates from high school. And at that point it was probably 5-6 years away. So yeah, and then we did it, right? Like, and it was one of the coolest experiences that we've ever had as a family. And it's been really fun to see the lessons learned from those experiences. Like my son has been to New York City now 4 times. And this last time he went with the high school drama department, and he was like, yeah, I just kind of took over. And I was like the tour guide. And he was leading his group all around the city, right? Like, because he's like, oh, we got to go check out this place. Like, this place has the best food, right? Like, whatever, right? Like, let's go over and check out this part of Central Park. I remember this. Like, let's go and like his and just watching his emotional intelligence from having like, and I think a lot of it has to do with getting outside of his bubble and experiencing the world and being out, right? Like, and I see that in all of my children. And I think there's a lot of power in travel, and you don't have to go internationally to experience it all, right? Like,
Yeah.
and he's now living in the Philippines for the next couple of years, and it's it's a different culture, but it's not too crazy for him because he's been around, right? Like he's explored, he's like so
I think kids get a lot of confidence from having unique experiences like that. So that's cool to see him shine with a group of peers in New York City.
yeah,
He has the confidence to be the leader in that group because he's been there, he's done
yep,
that, he's had those experiences.
yeah, it's
That's
a lot
super
of fun.
cool.
It's a lot of fun. Let's Before we wrap, let's fire through some rapid fire questions here. So you can take as long as you want to answer them, but I will fire through them. So what's been the best family excursion? Where is like the best place you've been?
We get asked that a lot. It's a hard question to answer, but since you said excursion, I'm going to focus on like a single experience that we had. And I would say Road of the Hiawatha Bike Trail up near Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We took some young kids on it, and it's a long bike trail, but it's all a very gentle downhill grade. And so that was like single experience,
Is that the one
freaking
that runs
amazing.
from Coeur d'Alene to Missoula? Or is that different?
No, that's different. This is you start at a ski resort and they shuttle you to the start.
Okay.
And then I think it's about 11 or 12 miles
Okay.
downhill. I think my daughter was on a 16-inch pink Barbie bike and was struggling. And we ended up, I didn't have anything to help her. I ended up pulling a branch out of the forest. It's an old railroad where they've removed the railroad, but you still go through some railroad tunnels and you're up on high ledges, just overlooking incredible scenery. So anyway, I grabbed a big old branch that I held behind me that we used a t-shirt to tie to her handlebars to drag her down the trail to get her off that trail. But yeah, we loved it.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Those are memories that you'll never forget. That's great. How do you respond to failure?
I think failure is important and it's part of the process, but it's difficult for me. Every time I fail, I do feel like, and I identify as a failure. That's something that I'm working on. How I actually respond to it, I think it's a bit of a coping mechanism, but not the most unhealthy coping mechanism, is I get back to work and I work extremely hard. So with business failures, if I lose a deal, I work twice as hard on the next one and I lose sleep over it, stay up all night working. If I fail in a physical pursuit, I double down and working on the next one. So I don't think that's super unhealthy, but also I recognize that helps me not feel like a failure as much if I turn around, I start working super hard on the next thing and know that I have another opportunity to win.
Yeah. Awesome. What is one of your greatest accomplishments?
Two things that come to mind. I think first one is a 50-mile ultra marathon. That was not even on my radar a year before I did it. And so I think that's physical accomplishments. I'd put that up there at the top. The other one is, I think just having the family that I have. We could spend a whole podcast on this, but coming from where I came from, I don't know that I actually felt it would be a reality and a possibility for me to have the happy, loving family that I have. So that's a massive accomplishment for me.
Good for you. That's awesome. What frightens you?
Failure. In a moment like this where I can just be logical, I know failure is a part of the process and it doesn't define who you are, and everyone's going to have plenty of, anyone who tries is going to have plenty of those. The man in the arena talks about how much better it is to have tried and failed than to have not have tried at all. And I love all of that. But failure still scares me to this day. Failing in business, failing as a husband, failing in a physical or athletic endeavor. Those things scare me. They do.
I think it takes a lot of mental fortitude and pushing through hard things to get to the point to where it's like, okay, I can handle failure, right? Like, because there is an emotional burden that comes with failing at anything, right? Like even pushing snooze on your alarm some days, right? Like that's a small little failure, but it can take a toll, right? Like it can throw your day off. And it just takes this, okay, well, tomorrow I'm not going to push snooze and pushing through, right? Like, and just try and fighting through it. So, what gives you hope for the future?
I think there's a book called Factfulness that kind of addresses that the world's not in as bad of a shape as media headlines have convinced us it is. And they share a lot of data and a lot of stats on how the world is actually the best place it's ever been in. And I think there's a lot of things in that vein that give me hope for the future, like how giving of a species the human race actually is,
Yeah.
how truly incredible our technological accomplishments are right now, and just things like that I actually think we're headed in a pretty good direction. I think there's certainly things that need to be on our radar that we need to be improving. Let's not be blind to those, but we're accomplishing amazing things as a human race right now, and media headlines will tell you the opposite.
For sure. There's a great book by Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler where it's called Abundance, and they talk all about just how abundant things are, right? Like, and that we don't need to fear for the future. That's great. What book are you reading right now?
I'm not in the middle of a book, but I'm starting one, and it is. I really want to give you the name because I think it's going to be a big one. It's called The Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
And Desmond Tutu.
It's great. It's great.
Okay. I haven't read it, but I have very high hopes. And that's why I wanted to share the title here in case anybody's listening and wants to read that. So I'm about to start.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great book. You'll really enjoy that one. So yeah, I think he's got an older one and then he's got a follow up to it. And I think the Book of Joy is the original, and then he's got a follow up. They're both really good. So, what book have you read in the past 12 to 18 months that you would highly recommend to others?
Super impactful book that I read this year that anyone involved in business, especially those running businesses, leaders in businesses, CEOs, owners, is The Motive by Patrick Lenciani. Super well known, a business author. A lot of people have read some of his other works, but The Motive is incredible and has changed how I think about running my businesses and the role that I play. Servant leadership has taken on a bit of a different meaning for me. So The Motive by Patrick Lenciani was an impactful one for me this year.
Okay, favorite place you've traveled to in the past?
Favorite place? The hard one, man. Love the Smoky Mountains. Okay, like Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, Tennessee, on the western side of the Smoky Mountains there. And I'll give you a 2-for-1. The Outer Banks, North Carolina was really cool as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't spent any time in the Outer Banks. That's on the list. It's on the short list. So we need to get up there. But I love the Smokies, both the west side and the east side. The east side's great. There's tons of waterfalls.
Yeah.
There's tons of great, it's so fun. It's so pretty.
Yeah.
Great little towns around there, right? Asheville and Greenville. And yeah, it's a little slice of heaven over there. It's fantastic.
It's beautiful.
So as we wrap, where can people keep up with you or follow you, Daryl?
Yeah, best place is probably LinkedIn. I've started to get a bit active on LinkedIn recently. So look me up on LinkedIn, Daryl Klingaman, and you can follow along there. I post a little bit about the businesses that I'm building. We'll be posting a little bit about working from the road, because that's something that I love and have a lot of experience with, and people are always asking me for advice on. So Daryl Klingaman on LinkedIn.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks for taking some time with us today, Daryl. Again, this is a bit of curiosity. We appreciate it. We'd love if you like, subscribe, share it. So thanks, Daryl.
Awesome. See you, Jeremy.